Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we kick off a look at the career of Wes Craven with his 1996 film Scream, which reinvigorated the slasher genre by injecting self-aware humor and mystery into the film. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's film, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans we have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Wow, great question. Blood and Roses. And from Los Angeles, Adam Foshko, screenwriter for the new Skylanders Superchargers, story consultant for Destiny the Taken King, and writer and creative producer for Call of Duty Advanced Warfare Exo Zombies. That's a hell of a lot of colons. Say hello, Adam.
Hi, y'all.
Hello, welcome back. And
thank you.
I have a creepy laugh.
Finally, which one of us?
Adam.
Oh, yeah. Also in Denver, as always, color commentary. That was an example from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Every time I hear you say Exo, what is it? Exo, what's the name of it?
Exo Zombies.
Exo Zombies. I always think of this thing that we watched a billion years ago that was like this animation celebration where he was talking about, like, was it like sexo thingies or something?
Sexo thingies. Yes.
In my head, I always hear exo thingies.
This insane person was obsessed with Miss America and sexo thingies. And it was a cool animation. But that's like 25 years ago.
I know, I'm saying.
Okay, according to Wikipedia, Scream is a 1996, 20 years old, man, 1996 American slasher film written by Kevin Williamson and directed by Wes Craven. The film stars Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Drew Barrymore, and David Arquette. Scream follows the character of Sidney Prescott, that's Campbell, a high school student in the fictional town of Woodsboro, California, who becomes the target of a mysterious killer called Ghostface. Other main characters include Sidney's best friend Tatum Riley, Rose McGowan, Sidney's boyfriend Billy Loomis, Skeet Ulrich, who Joya always calls, what? Oh, no.
Poor man's Johnny Depp.
The poor man's Johnny Depp. Or Johnny Depp
right.
was called by Chris Rock
which is kind of self-aware in its own way.
Yes, indeed. Billy's best friend Stu Macher, Matthew Lillard, film geek Randy Meeks, Jamie Kennedy, and David Arquette as the sheriff. And Courtney Cox, who met David Arquette here as the reporter. The film combined comedy and whodunit mystery with the violence of the slasher genre to satirize the cliche of the horror genre popularized in films such as Halloween and Friday the 13th. The film was considered unique at the time of its release for featuring characters who are aware of real-world horror films and openly discuss the cliche that Scream, the film, attempted to subvert. So that's a lot of discussion from Wikipedia, but it kind of kicks us off. I'd love to get our opening thoughts. Adam, did you start us last week? I'm trying to remember who went first last week.
I did start us last week.
All right, so if you don't mind, let's do Drew, Adam, Joya, and then I'll say something if there's anything left to be said. Opening thoughts, trying to keep it short so we can get into the topics.
I like this movie a lot. Its sequel, Scream 2, is actually my favorite Wes Craven movie, but I like this one a lot as well. I think the opening sequence, and I just watched this for the second time this month, earlier today, and I think the opening sequence remains one of the most tense sequences that I can think of in a horror film from the modern era. It's just super suspenseful and super creepy. When this movie first came out, I was in high school. I think I must have been a sophomore. Maybe I was a senior. I don't know. But I remember really, really, really loving the dialogue in the movie because I was very much the Randy character, as I'm sure a lot of people who are very into horror films are. And I think that gives a certain degree of relatability that just really, really spoke to me. You know, as I've often brought up on this podcast, I grew up in a small town. There wasn't a lot to do, so a lot of the times what my friends would get together and do is watch horror films. And this really delves into that sort of, identity of video store culture a lot. And, there's even a sequence in a video store. And I just, again, for whatever reason, that really spoke to me. And I love this movie. I think it's a good movie to kick this retrospective off with, and I'm looking forward to delving into it.
That's really great. Adam, what are your opening thoughts on Scream?
Listen, I really like this movie. I liked it when I first saw it, when it first came out. I've seen it off and on over the years, but in this most recent viewing, I think I probably garnered an even greater appreciation for it. I think as we were saying before we actually started, there are a few things that make it feel perhaps a little bit dated in terms of technology. But in general, I think the movie holds up remarkably well. I think it sets a really great hook. As Drew said earlier, it has a very, very, very strong opening. It sets up the rules for the movie. It sets a hook. It's really got a really great beginning, middle, and end. It's got a lot of action. Usually slasher movies just, there's suspense and things happen and they kind of go in for the kill. This is a lot of reversals and beats within the action scenes and all of the actual and all of the those moments. And it's really remarkably exciting. It's obviously, a genre-defining movie. And what I liked about it, I think, also is that it's symmetrical. The way we'll get to it when we actually get into the movie. But I mean, the structure of it is really strong. It's very symmetrical, and it features a strong but emotionally wounded female protagonist, which I think is great. Actually, having a very strong but vulnerable female protagonist is I think was unusual for the time. Even though I know Jamie Lee Curtis, emerged as strong, but I think Neve Campbell is strong kind of throughout, which is kind of interesting. And it had Henry Winkler, so how can you go wrong? But I really do like this movie. I think this is one of Wes Craven's stronger pictures. I really do like it.
Cool. All right. Well, excellent. Julia, I don't know if you've seen this movie before or not, but where did you land on this?
I have seen the movie before, and when I first saw it, I was really riveted by what who did it, like the whodunit part of it. And I think that the resolution of whodunit in this movie is a great one. I really like it a lot. So that's, I think, a really cool thing. I actually completely disagree with what you have said, Jason, in the past, which is that you don't like how it spawned all these self-aware movies. I love self-aware movies. I think it's a lot of fun. And so I enjoy that part. I enjoy Drew Barrymore. I enjoy Neve Campbell. And I really enjoy Matthew Lillard. I think he's so bizarre, and Skeet Ulrich too, but Matthew Lillard is so bizarre. He's such a breath of fresh air for a movie like this. So, I like the cast, and I like the self-awareness. I never do like the gore, but this one's not as bad as it could have been given, especially that it was supposed to be like, that they had a hard time getting a rated R rating because of the violence, the gore. I don't think it's that gory.
I think this movie is more brutal than gory, if we can make a distinction, because a lot of, despite the fact that it's a slasher movie, a lot of the kills don't actually come at the end of there's a lot of gunplay in this movie, and and there's also, I think that the grisliest thing in it is when Rose McGowan meets her end at the garage door, but that's not even particularly gory. It's painful looking.
Exactly. I mean, you want to talk about head-crushing scenes. I mean, this is like 10 years after The Toxic Avenger. I don't know. This is not. Oh, I guess now I'm giving my first response. This is not a gory film. So my theory about this film is that this, and I know that we're going to argue genre. It'll be our first topic. my theory about this film is that this is not even a horror movie at all. This is a mystery film that is obsessed with horror movies as its motif, in the same way that you might have a mystery film that's obsessed with ancient Egypt and everybody's talking about, or the Maltese Falcon or something. I think the horror film is just sort of the topic that is driving the mystery, but it's a mystery movie. Now, my other opening thought is that I can't stand what this thing did to the movies. I think this is a good film. I really enjoyed it. I think it's very clever, and it has some of the most wonderful sound design I've ever heard. I love the way it uses diegetic music in the third act. But having said that, I think this movie doing well doomed us to the last 20 years of self-awareness, and I just feel like nobody makes primary text anymore. We only make commentaries, and it just and that's the hilarious thing is that I'm saying.
I don't know if that's true anymore, though. I can't think of a lot. There were a lot of Scream knockoffs. I don't know if they're unless we're going to include Cabin in the Woods, but I can't remember the last time I saw like a slasher movie made in this vein. I think we've moved into the remake phase.
Yeah, it's probably run its course. But I mean, the other thing is, Jason, is as I think you sort of were pointing out. I mean, this is it's kind of genre defining and somewhat genre defying. I think partly because I think it was trying to appeal to a different audience, not the usual sort of slasher audience that, I think this was a crafted movie. I think it was, I think it has horror elements for sure. So there's a horror payoff. And if it was the topic, if there's a whodunit with a sort of a horror topic, I think that, it was perhaps, I don't want to call it was sort of not a thinking person's horror movie or a slasher movie. I don't think that's accurate, but I think it was a hit person's slasher movie. It's something that it was much more mainstream. The soundtrack was definitely engineered. The movie, I think there were a lot of elements in it that kind of go beyond the usual trappings. So, I think it defied the genre as much as defined a new subgenre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
First of all, a movie can be more than one genre. You don't have to really
sure
pigeonhole something into one thing. And the slasher genre in particular is very related to mystery because it's all it goes back to Agatha Christie and and then there were none, that kind of thing.
True. But with the traditional slasher, usually the way the mystery is revealed is people are getting killed. There's not much attention paid to who is the one doing it. I mean, there is, but it's not as though you're presented a whole bunch of characters and you're forced by the script to think about who among the characters you've met so far has done it. It's more like people start getting killed. Eventually somebody goes under the house or under the whatever or finds a secret room. They find all the old photographs and the old clippings. They figure out who the killer is. And then you have a final act that sort of works it all out.
No, I understand what you're saying, but this movie opens with a opening sequence that involves somebody being disemboweled. That's a horror film.
But I couldn't even tell she was disemboweled. She was like, I'm not trying to be argumentative or to say that the movie doesn't do its job. I want to stipulate that right out. But I could not tell she was disemboweled. I needed the... No.
I'm talking about the boyfriend who you very clearly see his guts hanging out.
Huh.
Well, yeah, and also they
tell you that. I mean,
they say
everybody knows.
Yeah, that wasn't. I know this is going to sound terrible, but that was not clear to me. It was so unclear. I saw a lot of blood. I saw duct tape, but
it wasn't clear to me either. But they say it when they talk about.
Yeah, they say they were gutted.
I think it was for the rating. I think it was for the rating. The sound design had a lot to do with it. There's a lot of splatter. There are definitely some. And
Wes Craven is playing clever. I mean, he pulls up. Drew's absolutely right. When the guy gets gutted, it happens, but the camera goes up next to the guy's ear. We're moving away from, it's not, it's, yes, totally brutally violent, but we don't see most of it. It's kept at a sort of a I don't know. And
I'm not saying it's not tastefully done, but it still happens.
You're
that's
saying
a slasher,
with that
that's
kind
a
of
slasher
violence,
movie.
That kind of violence puts it into the realm of
yeah.
I
I think that's you have a guy in a mask, wandering, chasing a blonde teenage girl around a house. That's that's a certain genre.
I guess so. I don't know why I'm having a hard time agreeing with that, and because it's probably not fair, especially since we've had this conversation in the past about other stuff where I said, there are such things as thrillers, and you said, look, thrillers are horror movies.
This is a great example that this movie was marketed as a thriller. If a movie's goal is to shock and horrify you, it is a horror film. And this movie certainly has frightening you on the agenda. Is it Hellraiser levels of violence? Is it Dead Alive levels of violence? No.
Well,
that wasn't necessarily needed.
But nor is it Maniac Cop, nor is it Friday the 13th, nor is it even Halloween, where right out of the gate.
Halloween's actually less gory than this.
That's totally true.
I mean, my point is, it starts with a killing.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the granddaddy of these kind of movies, is less gory than this.
All right, but let me try this instead then. To me, the amount of time that they spend most of their time in this movie, besides the deaths, they spend most of the time in this movie talking about a genre of film that they're all interested in discussing and engaging in a mystery. To me, this is a commentary in a sense.
I'm not saying it's not a mystery as well.
Yeah, but I'm saying I wasn't horrified this movie. There was never a moment in this movie when I felt engaged by these characters or felt like they were anything like real people to me, because I thought instead they were characters who were engaging in an ongoing conversation. I felt like it was an essay put on. I don't know. I did not connect with this movie. This movie to me felt like Wes Craven's very clever commentary on horror movies. But
so I mean, was it the self-referential part of it that was a distraction for you, Jason?
Yeah, because when you look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those guys never stop to go, gosh, how interesting it is that that all this stuff is happening.
But isn't that as bad as when we sit here and we're watching a vampire movie and we go, for some reason in this universe these people don't know what vampires are.
No, you're right.
For some reason in this universe, they don't know what zombies are. No one says the word. It just sort of becomes this weird thing. It's like no one's here. They say slasher movie, and they say it right up front, and they have the rules.
You're right. It always annoys me.
And the rules don't actually even really apply. The rules are just something they think they have in their head, right? But they don't actually apply. I mean,
maybe I'm being unfair. I don't know.
I think you are.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of fun because of the whodunit. When Matthew Lillard says, "I'm going to go get a drink. I'll be right back," and then you're like, "Oh crap!" We can
look. Listen. I think it just again has more appeal. Not that there's anything wrong with a slasher movie. There's nothing wrong with the genre. And I think the whodunit elements are interesting. Normally, we're preoccupied, less with who's doing it, more about who's going to have it done to them and when. And that kind of thing.
Honestly, the fact that they are able to comment on the fact that they are living within a horror film made these characters, to me, the first time I saw this film, more real to me, because I was like, this is what would happen if my friends and I found themselves in a slasher movie. We'd be like,
true, but don't you think you'd be a lot? The level of discourse that these guys are going into on horror movies is so elementary, and I mean, and it's
really.
I feel like Drew would be so much better at surviving in a horror movie than than Jamie Kennedy.
That is exactly what would get you. That's exactly what would get you killed, Jason.
Yeah, exactly. This arrogance. That's going to be the next rule that I add to the rules. Is the arrogant guy is the first one who's going to get killed.
I'm calling it now. Next sequence would be Ghostface sneaking up behind Jason and slitting his throat.
Well, it's just like the guy in the movie who's like, look behind you, and then he's behind him. It's exactly like that.
Oh, that was brilliant. But that's Jamie Kennedy. Yeah. Although Jamie, he actually does survive. That's Randy. And by the way, I love that
But he doesn't survive the sequel.
Yeah, I vaguely have.
Well, and he only survives because somehow he managed to survive, but he gets hurt.
Hopefully, we're going to do Scream 2 in this retrospective. But I want to talk about Ghostface a little bit, the killer at the center of all of this. I thought that the movie was called Scream because Ghostface wears an Edvard Munch Scream mask.
Yeah.
But Drew was telling me that the design of Ghostface actually went right up to the very end, and I don't even know how he's going to design Ghostface. Drew, can you tell us?
Well, what were you going to say?
Well,
I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, that was a noise.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had thought that the whole point of it being called Scream was and that the mask and the name Scream tie together.
Right.
Because it's a Scream mask. It's like a mask based on Edvard Munch's.
That may well very be true, but the mask existed several years before this movie. I had that mask in junior high in both orange and bright green.
Yeah, but here's what it says. What it says in the trivia on IMDb is that they were looking for. Now I don't know if the movie had already been named Scream by this point. They were looking for a mask for him to wear, and somebody saw a mask similar to this in a place that they were scouting. So they created one similar to the one that they found. And yes, it is based on Edvard Munch, but I don't know if they had always intended to find something like that, and then that was just the closest thing they found. Or
the original title of the movie was Scary. The original title of the movie was Scary Movie.
I think it was. I think they found the mask. They went, let's make a mask similar to this based on Scream, and then they named. That's my theory.
Well, they never could get the mask to look as scary as the one that they saw, so they just eventually licensed the actual mask. Because I'm telling you, I own several of these masks, and they look identical. And the only difference is they were like very garish. They didn't have the white. They had like the very garish, oranges and greens and purples But I mean, every year in like the early '90s, if you would go to Walmart around Halloween time, you would see these what would eventually call Ghostface masks, and they, this came out, and of course it became the default Halloween costume for over a decade for anybody wanting a lazy Halloween costume.
Because it was everywhere. In fact, I believe that there are that the two masks show up in the movie. Like, in other words, Craven, you're right. From what I've read, Craven was unhappy with the way the designed mask worked, and so they switched back to an off-the-rack mask. But you do see the designed mask in a couple of scenes, and I can't remember which ones they are. I think the one where Henry Winkler gets killed in the office is a mask that's been built for the film.
The designed mask has a much more pronounced look to it. Like, it actually looks a lot more like that Edvard Munch screen painting. It's a lot more exaggerated. But and you can easily Google, like, if you want to see what it looks like, you can Google it. It's pictures of it are on the internet. Sure. But I think the fact that it is that this sort of off the rack costume actually kind of makes it a little bit more frightening, because it really does seem like, okay, some lunatic just picked this up and decided to go on a killing spree. Or in this case,
more plausible that a couple lunatics could do it.
Yeah. And I think the idea that there are two killers is something that I think that they're compensating for. One of the tropes of the slasher genre is that the slasher can be anywhere.
Yeah.
So the fact that they have
I
two
love
people,
it. I love it.
I like that too. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's like they're trying to recreate in the quote unquote real world, or the world that this takes place in, which is, you know, maybe one notch down from the real world, whereas opposed to like Friday the 13th series, which exists in EC Comics land, and you know, Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers can be anywhere. But to do that in real life, you would need more than one person. And
no, that's a really good point. That's a very, very good
something,
point.
you know, having watched all four of them, you know, recently, with the passing of Craven, something did occur to me. None of the killers ever are dispatched while they're in Ghostface persona. It is only when they shed down to their mortal guise that they're vulnerable and able to be killed. Therefore, in subverting tropes, Scream has actually created a trope of its own that is, you are invincible as long as you are Ghostface. But once you allow yourself to be you are vulnerable.
Which is actually a very profound statement, because that's how we go through life, is wearing masks because we don't want to be vulnerable.
I think that's true.
Thank
Joy
you,
and I
Julia.
have attended a lot of stuff.
Huh.
I mean, we've attended a lot of stuff where we talk about the masks that we wear on a day-to-day basis and how we wear different masks with different people. I'd like to return to that, but I wanted to mention, you know, a little bit more about the way Ghostface in here performs. I love the physicality of Ghostface. I love how Ghostface can be tripped. He grunts when he gets smacked. You know, if you hit him with a door, he'll go, wah, you know, and he'll fall backwards. You know, he's a real person under there, which is, to me, just like showing Michael's eyes behind the mask. It works for me. I like the notion that you're going to see that there's a crazy person who's put a mask on. And this is strictly a stylistic choice, because you could also have filmed this character to be completely impenetrable. Like, you would have no idea, like he would become sort of inhuman in the way he moves and everything. But Ghostface totally doesn't. He stumbles all over the place, like he's a teenager who's just put on a mask and a robe.
I like the Ghostface phone call persona a lot. Like that's the evil quiz master is. I think I mean, the fact that he trips her up on who's the killer in the first Friday the 13th. You know,
right.
And maybe that is not an elementary piece of
no, I think to a large portion of the populate. I think it's elementary, and you think it's elementary, and a lot of people think it's elementary. But we also have to think that they were having to make this work for not just hardcore horror nerds, but people who would be like, the people who would be screaming at the screen, going, "No, Drew Barrymore! Jason's mom was the killer in the first one." Like they had to have that. That's like a setup for audience participation to me.
Right.
But I just love the voice of Ghostface. He does have a commonality with Freddy Krueger, which is Craven's other great horror creation, is that he's kind of glib. Yeah. There's that glibness to Ghostface that it does, the fact that it does turn out to be two teenage boys, that glibness makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and he's impatient. I like that he grows irritated with the answers that he gets from the people he's on the phone with. He's very human. I mean, this is one of the things I do like about Ghostface, is that he is way human. You brought up a really good point, which is that physically he appears to be more invulnerable. More invulnerable, is that a proper phrase? I don't know. But, he has greater invulnerability when he is in that guise. Otherwise, though, he's way human. He makes mistakes.
Well, here's the question. So you keep saying he, But I guess I'm wondering now is Skeet Ulrich always the voice, or do they trade even on the voice? Because
there's
Matthew
a guy.
Lillard's personality is so different than Skeet Ulrich's that I'm trying to decide if you can tell that even when they're talking.
I can't remember. It's not Skeet Ulrich on the phone. It's that there's a guy that does Ghostface. The Ghostface phone calls through all 4 movies.
I don't mean that. No, I know it's Roger Jackson. Yeah, the Killer's phone calls are done by this guy Roger Jackson. And
right, but you're saying whether they switch off personality-wise.
But I'm saying the characters. Yeah, I'm saying the characters, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're wondering who's doing what?
And
I'm wondering if the characters, given that we're talking about, that he gets frustrated, that he gets mad, are they both taking on the same persona when they make the call, or is one person makes the close to the call?
Well, do you think they had Ghostface meetups where they got together and okay, so what is Ghostface gonna act like? Do you think they talked about
because
this?
Because it has to be both of them, because the person who's doing the call is always the one who's about to kill, because they're right there and they're seeing everything, and they both take turns. So it has to be.
Well, Skeet Ulrich is far more damaged. It sounds like in a violent way, than Matthew Lillard. So, I mean, for example, the guy who goes, "Don't hang up on me," he's the guy who has abandonment issues. It wouldn't shock me if that was Skeet Ulrich's character.
Yeah, that's Skeet Ulrich. We actually know which one's which because Matthew Lillard has an alibi for that one. And so that's why then they're like, oh, it's Skeet Ulrich may have done it, but then Skeet Ulrich has an alibi for the next murder, so that's why. So it has to be Matthew Lillard that does, it has to be Skeet Ulrich that does the first one with Drew Barrymore.
You think Skeet Ulrich does the first one with
He does the Drew Barrymore and the football player, because Matthew Lillard's like, hey, I was with, he's with his girlfriend or whatever. They were together the whole time, and everybody's like, maybe Skeet Ulrich did it, because he doesn't really have a good alibi. And then when he's in jail for it is when the other murder, or whenever he shows up. Yeah. So that's why he's not it.
So which one killed the girlfriend? Was it Matthew Lillard or was it Skeet Ulrich? Because they did a whole bit about it.
Sadistically, I think Matthew Lillard killed his own girlfriend.
Okay. Because of the conversation in the video store, or
yeah, that would be my. Plus, wasn't Nev Campbell upstairs with Matthew with Johnny Depp Jr. at the time?
Yes, that's the sexual encounter.
Yeah. 4 minutes, Johnny Depp, right?
Which also goes to show you the even in the world even though this universe is hung up on the rules of slasher movies, the rules are bullshit.
Yeah.
The rules don't make any sense. She's not a virgin,
but she still survives. But the final, we can go around and around on the Final Girl. I do love Final Girl theory. I'm very impressed by it, and I loved Men, Women, and Chainsaws. But it's not completely necessary. It's a way.
I would argue that this movie wouldn't exist without Men, Women, and Chainsaws.
I think that's fair to say.
You want to run over that a little bit for anybody who doesn't know what that is?
Yeah.
Do you want to do it, Drew? About
No. That's all you. Go
okay.
for it.
Carol Clover, and I'm not looking this up, so I'm hoping I'm getting that name correct. Carol Clover was a professor who wrote a book called Men, Women, and Chainsaws, and it was about how slasher movies were acting out gender-related anxieties in our society. She was one of the first people that I ever read who talked about the notion of the final girl, and she described the final girl, which is generally the one character in a slasher film who manages to make it through the entire film and is the one who is the lead at the end. She's the final girl who lives, and usually shares certain traits such as innocence, or we might say virginality, but not necessarily a virgin, but innocence, and usually a certain amount of kindness, and also a little bit of gender nonconformity. That her name is often a kind of a male-ish kind of name, like Roxy, or in this case, Sydney. Sid. So, Sydney is indeed the perfect final girl. Men, Women, and Chainsaws is a wonderful book. I mean, my God, it is so great to read, and and she is not interested at all in metatext. She's looking at like just countless slasher films. I loved it. I mean, it was It's a really great book. It's a favorite book of Quentin Tarantino's. I'll bet you anything. I think you're right on. Probably the makers of this film are damn aware of it. I think now it's kind of cliche. I think everybody's sort of aware of the Final Girl and all that stuff.
Well, anybody who's seriously interested in horror films has heard about Men, Women. At least I think so. If you have an academic interest in horror, if there is such a thing.
And there is. But you're right. It's by now. I mean, it's the Our Bodies, Ourselves of horror film at this point. Everybody's at least seen a copy laying around somewhere.
No, I have one on my bookshelf. So hey,
I loaned mine to somebody and I've lost it. So that's sad. And anyway, so I don't know where we were going to. Oh yeah, well we were talking about how Sydney fits into the trope of the final girl. And she certainly has the right name, and she has the virginality. In this case, it's kind of forced by the script, which is brilliant. I mean, she's forced into being a virgin by the fact that she's traumatized by these murders that took place. That so she's fit into.
Well, her mother was murdered a year earlier, which we at least later find out. There's a guy that she fingered as the killer. Who is on death or
a very young Liev Schreiber,
Is that how you say Schreiber?
He has a bigger role in the sequels, but
so
basically glorified cameo in this. But
did they know they were coming back with a sequel? I mean, in other words,
they planned on doing the 3 because like I remember at the time Kevin Williamson was like, I want to do the Star Wars of slasher movies.
All right.
And
I can see that.
But
he's such a good actor, and even when he wasn't he's a big star and people recognize him now. But look, even back into the '90s, people knew Liev Schreiber was a very, very excellent actor. He had won awards. He's been on Broadway. So you don't cast him to show up in one frame unless you intend to bring him back, I guess.
Well, you said he's got a bigger role in Scream 2 and 3, but man, also of course the thing is there's a trashy book written about her mother being killed, written by Courtney Cox's character, who is sort of the embodiment of 1990s television in a lot of ways, and not just because she herself was on Friends, but because she's, the current affair, Jerry Springer kind of journalist that was rampant at the time.
Wow. I mean, I think that probably those are even more rampant now. I mean, in fact, I think that commentary I think disappears a little bit nowadays watching it, because I think, if anything, this is just my perception, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like journalism has been even more degraded since then. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we have Courtney Cox, who was a big TV star, huge TV star. I mean, you cannot, for anybody who's fairly young and listening to this, you cannot understand how popular Friends was. It was like the whole world stopped once a week to watch Courtney Cox. So the fact that she's showing up here in a minor role, is that this is
not
all
so minor. It's a pretty significant role.
Well, this is all going to prove, though, that this is a huge Hollywood, what Joe Bob would call indoor bull stuff picture. It is a major work, and it's weird that it's Wes Craven. When we say it that way, when we realize this is an indoor movie that comments on outdoor movies, it's so funny that it's Wes Craven who's moved indoors, as it were.
I think that's one of the things that I like most about it, is because I feel like it's Wes Craven continuing, which we will get to talk more about next week, but continuing the vein that he started with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and it's sort of subverting Hollywood horror from within the belly of the beast, so to speak. It's actually my favorite point in his career, and I don't care how much street cred that cost me. No,
it's all right. I mean, I'm a huge fan of New Nightmare.
Well, when you think about it, who better than Wes Craven to actually than to do that?
Yeah, Yeah, because he's coming all the way from Last House on the Left, which is was made for pizza money, and he's come all the way to this, which is a major. God, how gorgeous! I mean, first of all, by the way, I have two thoughts. One, this is gorgeous. Two, this guy behind the camera is really talented. When he shows a character getting chased upstairs, the way he moves the camera is with such confidence. He can always tell the story, and he keeps it scary. And he's not resorting to any sort of shaky cam tricks or anything like that. It's this. He's just really good at telling a story. But this is a gorgeous movie. I mean, with it being so far past those grindhouse days. So it's not grainy. It doesn't look like. In my mind, this thing doesn't look like a horror movie. It looks like. I don't even know. It looks like a slick, high-budget thing.
I wonder if that's really what you have trouble with, Jason. I wonder if it's because it just doesn't have the ragged, jagged look of some horror or slasher movies, particularly the low-budget ones. Look, we all have a love for them, and this is, in a way, doesn't just. You may on the one hand say that it celebrates it. But it makes it so mainstream, but it's done really with great craft. Yeah. And it's it's packaged in such a way that I think it has much more universal appeal, as is evidenced by the box office and the fact that it did so amazingly well. But is that one of the things that I don't know if it turned off other people who are more who like the genre, or whether they found this to be a really great extension of the genre.
I can hear
it certainly as a film and as a series, it certainly has a lot of detractors. There's a lot of people that really hate Scream because of, and I think that's personally I think that's a little unfair. I think they're kind of blaming it for its lesser imitators.
So I want to talk about the imitators in a sec, but I want to take a crack at answering Adam's question, because I think for you, Drew, I think you're saying yes, this is a good extension of horror, of classic horror, into this what I would call this new look that I was not really aware of until the 90s. This new look of super high def images, even at night, and everything is so clean and so crisp and so good looking. This looks a lot like I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I don't know where that fits into all of this. But whereas to me,
I Knew What You Did Last Summer was definitely after this.
All right, and probably has a lot to do with the success of this film. But if whereas to me, a movie like this should look like, we watched House of the Devil, and House of the Devil deliberately has this sort of low-grade, deliberately degraded, grainy, shadowy, difficult-to-light look that, to me, is what a horror movie should feel like. So I think Adam's right. I think I'm having an emotional reaction that's probably not fair to the film. Because it's like saying, I went to see that James Bond movie, and I really don't like James Bond movies because I wish they were more like courtroom dramas. Well, it's not a courtroom drama. It's a James Bond movie. Why are you, So I think that's probably, that's a good point. I'm probably just rejecting it because it doesn't look like Last House on the Left or something like that. That's a guess. But I really like that theory.
But, isn't, you were saying you didn't like the self-aware trend, I would say, stuff like Grindhouse and House of the Devil, and I like those movies, but the fact that they are deliberately recreating a low-budget look, isn't that its own form of, being meta and self-aware?
It is, but it makes me happier. I much prefer pastiche to parody. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
there's no right or wrong preferences. You just.
But I wait. If you're going to make a Sherlock Holmes pastiche where everything's going to be just like a Sherlock Holmes thing, you just change the character's name. But it's a perfect, dead solid, perfect pastiche of copy of, say, a 1940s Sherlock Holmes. So he's just like Basil Rathbone, just like Nigel Bruce. There's fog. There's everything, but you play it totally straight. I love that kind of thing more than if you do the same thing, but everybody makes comments about it all the time. Yeah, because I don't need the commentary. I feel like it's too self-congratulatory. Again, maybe I'm being a little harsh on this, and I keep apologizing because I know that this movie is important to you, Drew. But that one, I don't know. It doesn't work for me. It feels, I don't know, too self-congratulatory. And I might even change my mind about this as we continue to go through the Wes Craven series.
I don't actually feel like you're being that. I don't actually feel like you personally are being that harsh. I've heard, much less well-articulated arguments against Scream, and much harsher. But again, ultimately, I don't care because I love these movies. And again, particularly Scream 2. That's my favorite Wes Craven movie. I love that movie.
Now, also, we disagree on movies all the time, but I do, by the way, like. The funny thing is, I do enjoy some of the self-referencing commentary. Some of the stuff where they're talking about how it's in a movie, I'm going to live to be in the sequel. To be honest, those lines made me laugh. So I was okay.
Well, ultimately, it's like Tony always says, there's always room for a good version of something. And this is,
yes.
Whether or not we want to get into whether some of the imitators.
Talk to me about the imitators. I'm interested in this because I'm not aware. I have a tendency to watch the first film of anything and then none of the rest.
Well, I mean, this of course spawned a franchise. But, I'm not going to get into that too much. But, there was I Know What You Did Last Summer. There was Urban Legend. This, I would say, indirectly caused the resurrection of the Chucky franchise. It probably was one of the reasons why we got Freddy versus Jason. It did sort of infuse new life into the slasher genre. But suddenly, all of them were funny, and I know to a lot of horror films fans that got to be a bit tiresome, really quick, and I understand that. But I feel like this movie has actual wit to it, whereas a lot of the imitators, I mean, they're just that. They're imitators. And, I mean, how often does an imitation actually measure up to something that this movie was unique at the time. It would be like showing, I always say that Die Hard seems riddled with cliches to people who have, never seen it, but seen any action movie made sense.
And you have to be willing to take off your awareness of it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right,
no, I think that does it for me. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and that's I like that you quoted what Tony said. I think Tony's commentary that there's always room for a good version of anything. That's totally true. I could say I'm so sick of self-referencing stuff, and then somebody comes out with something brand new, and it just hits just right, and you go, well, I guess I was wrong. There's always, and it's true, there's always room for a good version of anything, no matter how many there have been before. If you can figure out a clever way to do it, yeah, totally. Can anybody name off imitators? Does I Know What You Did Last Summer, does that fit into the world of imitation?
Oh, that's definitely that was definitely a Scream knockoff.
They all became funny. I mean, that was also sort of the time that I just stopped watching a lot of these things. And to be honest, when it comes to horror, I kind of quit sometime around the 90s, or I quit moving forward with the world at about that point. It was like I just got off the train. I was like, all of these movies look the same. They all look really slick and black, and I don't mean dark, depressing. I mean, they all look like I don't know. I'm thinking of the remake of Stranger in the House, and everything's so darn slick looking. It all looks like an episode of Party of Five. No offense to Nev Campbell, who's very good in this picture, but.
I have to say though, if a movie's a Hollywood movie, it's a Hollywood movie. I See, I've grown very tired of, like, even though I initially enjoyed, like, when they first did Grindhouse, I think those two movies are fun, but I've grown really, really tired of movies that are trying to, imitation low budget. It's like, you can be inspired by low budget movies, but you don't have to. And I have no idea what the budget for Scream was. I'm sure it was for a slasher movie. It was pretty generous, but the cast. This had a very good cast for a 1990s film. But
I
have no idea.
But I mean, I think that I think films that were trying to capitalize on the low budget thing are just come off as insincere.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would rather watch I Know What You Did Last Summer over Hobo with a Shotgun.
I have not seen Hobo with a Shotgun because it looked to me, and maybe I was being unfair, but it looked to me like another Killer Tomatoes in a sense. A movie
I've seen Hobo with a Shotgun. I never need to see it ever again.
Yeah. You're right. That really is an imitation Grindhouse. That's where somebody's like, let's do a movie that would fit into that whole Grindhouse feel. By the way, I like Machete though. Machete is.
I like Machete, but Machete to me, they're the Grindhouse, but to me those are almost Mel Brooks movies.
Right.
They are definitely comedic in ways that Scream isn't even. I want to backtrack though. You were talking about Neve Campbell.
Yeah,
and I just want to say this again, having watched all four of these in preparation for this. The fact that this was a woman-led franchise, let alone in the horror genre, is kind of astounding when you think about it. That's almost progressive for its. It's time to, this is way before the Hunger Games. What, no?
A strong woman, no less. She's not.
And emotionally complex. She's not Superwoman, but she's got vulnerability, but she's very strong and
she's determined.
Well,
I
think this sets that up. This is one of the first times we'd really sort of seen that. Jamie Lee Curtis made out to be strong at some point, through the course of Halloween.
Ridley and Alien, but that's
right. But this is the first time we're out of the gate. She is strong, and as Drew says, emotionally complex. She's clearly been emotionally vulnerable because of the loss of her mother. But so she's real. She's not just a cutout. And it's sort of real in a sense. It's very interesting, and it's very. I think it was probably part of it being a movie with a broader appeal. I think it was done very intentionally, and I think it was and successfully. I think it's something that the audience responded to remarkably. It wasn't just. I think this is a movie to be seen by couples. This is a movie to be, this is the kind of thing where it wasn't just, four guys, hang out and they go see, a slasher movie. You could go on a date and see this movie, and actually everybody gets something out of it. And I think that did an enormous thing for the genre in a lot of ways. I thought that was.
Well, it's funny that you say that. It's funny that you say that because I saw this movie in the theater initially with my guy friends, but then I remember I had a girlfriend at the time, Kelly, who was a few years older than me, who had a loft in Dallas, and I would sometimes go up and stay with her in the weekend, and sometimes she was an art house kind of gal, and she sometimes would scoff at me watching so many horror films. And the way I got her to watch horror films with me was we watched Scream, and she was like, "Oh, okay. I get what you're getting at." So, you're right on.
It's interesting. Yeah, okay. I'll totally accept that. And by the way, I think Neve Campbell's fantastic. I mean, I wish that she had done more. I remember she did the dance number in Reefer Madness, which I thought was fantastic. And I'm talking about the remake of Reefer Madness. And
thankfully,
she's great. That was really good, by the way. But I actually don't quite understand what happened to Neve Campbell's career in the past 10 or 15 years. I mean, although I think she's going to be on the next series of House of Cards, so that'll be awesome. So, I'll definitely start watching House of Cards just for Neve Campbell, because I've kind of given up on that show. But I think she's awesome. And I like she has freckles. She's a really interesting performer, interesting in her look and interesting in her line readings. I mean, she's fun to watch. So, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything. There's one more thing I wanted to touch on. Well, actually, okay, we didn't talk yet about the score. And to the extent that we should also talk about any datedness, that would be the last thing. But the score, the only thing that I wanted to mention is I really love the way that in the last bit of this movie, the last act, you have the music from Halloween is the music of this movie. As supposedly in real time, they're walking around and exciting things are happening, and the music from Halloween that's playing on the TV is just the music that we hear, but it's diegetic music. It actually exists in the world of the movie, and so they can hear it too. I mean, that's super clever, and that really made me want to stand up and cheer. That was amazing. Drew, you were talking about the sound.
I actually like the score, the proper score of this movie. I think it's very.
How do you distinguish between a soundtrack and a score? Because that maybe I don't know.
The soundtrack is like the music, how this movie they have "School's Out" by Alice Cooper. That's soundtrack.
Words.
Okay, sorry.
The score is the music that is it's created specifically for the movie.
Okay.
And I think the score is very interesting in this movie. It's not very musical. It's almost like sound effects. It sounds like knives grinding up against each other, and I really think it's but we talked a lot about the slickness of it, but the score is actually kind of avant-garde.
And a big chunk of the score is actually the Halloween score.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about like what Jason was just talking about. I'm talking about the actual music that was written for the movie, which has its own.
But I mean, at one point they just used the score from Halloween for a whole bunch of the.
Right. No. But that's only in the third act. When you're in the beginning. And who did the score here? I actually don't recall.
Marco, something with a B. I feel bad. I cannot remember the guy's last name. But I
Marco Beltrami. Sorry.
There we go. It's got this sort of weird. Again, it's not very. The score itself is not very musical, but I think that's one of the things I think is really interesting about it.
It's wall to wall.
Well, it runs counter to the soundtrack, which is again I think part of it's been put together to be very very appealing to a broader base. So I mean it's interesting that you have they sort of run, counter to each other in a lot of ways because one is obviously and the music is actually quite good in this movie. Not just the soundtrack, but not just the score, but also the soundtrack. It's very memorable. It's very cool. And I think it has it had a lot of appeal. I think the soundtrack probably did quite well, just in general. So it was definitely back when. There was a lot of when music design was sort of I think it started really in the 90s is when they actually began to hire music designers to actually compile soundtracks or have music go with the movies. This looks like it was designed in a lot of ways. So it's interesting to then also have these periods, not only the diegetic Halloween music, which I think worked brilliantly, as you said, Jason, but also, this music, which is kind of avant-garde besides, in terms of the score. It's very interesting.
Well, it's also, we were talking about before we started recording, the use of Red Right Hand by Nick Cave, which was carried over into all of the sequels, so much so that he actually composed a new version for Scream 3. And I love that song. I think this was probably the first time I heard it, although Jason was just saying it was on X-Files as well, which is, of course, another 1990s touchstone.
Which, by the way, is coming back. I'm so excited.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got the X-Files soundtrack in September of 1996, and it had Red Right Hand on it at the time. So I know that song was around and that Chris Carter was using it. But having said that, I only knew it from that album. I wouldn't have remembered it from any given episode here. And when I was watching this here, you're right. That, Nick Cave comes on, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. Because, to me, that's such a great song. I have no idea if you would consider Nick Cave, really indie. I certainly would never consider Nick Cave super Hollywood, but he fits with whatever mindset you got to be in if you're into the X-Files and Scream. I mean, I think so. So maybe.
Well, I think of Nick Cave as sort of goth country punk almost. Like it's Nick Cave is sort of his own genre,
Yes.
But I definitely think he's a great soundtrack for. Any one of his songs will go down well with a horror film, and Red Right Hand is the theme for the universe of Scream is kind of
fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it really 1994 it originally came out. I think it's really honestly one of my favorite rock songs in existence, and I was in a way a little sad that it shows up in Scream because I wish I wish it sort of existed for all horror movies. I mean, it's a wonderful, but it fits well here, so that's great. So that's probably about as much as we can wring out of this without going necessarily into all of the plot. But I'd like to go around and get final thoughts. You can pick up whatever we might have missed and what people should look for. And I'm really happy that we're kicking off the Craven conversation with this. So let's go around in the same direction. Drew, Adam, Julia, Jason. Drew, final thoughts. Scream.
Oh, I could probably talk another hour or two about this movie because I think there's a lot to talk about. But I think, for the sake of brevity, I think we've hit a lot of the good discussion points. No doubt, our online friends will probably scare up some topics that we've missed. No pun intended. But I love this movie a lot. It was very nostalgic revisiting it because it just was a movie that I was profoundly affected by when I was a teenager, and I greatly enjoyed revisiting it. I hope we get to do Scream 2. If not for this retrospective, I hope we get to work it into something else because it is literally my favorite Wes Craven movie. But I felt like there would be no point in discussing Scream 2 without first discussing Scream. So this was a logical starting point for our Craven discussion.
Huh. All right, well said. I think we've got to get to it. I would even though it's a retrospective where you hit all over his career, maybe it makes sense to spend a little time and go Scream and Scream 2. That probably makes sense. So, okay, Adam, final thoughts, Scream.
I totally appreciate what Drew said about it being nostalgic. I think, for me, I have this gene, probably being the son of a television and film producer, where I can see a movie again and again and again and again and have it still feel like the first time. But I really watched this movie with fresh eyes again and kind of rediscovered it, and I found it to be a huge sort of breath of fresh air. I wish I had thought about it and had seen it when I was working with Rose McGowan on Exo Zombies. That would have been sort of one of those remarkable things. But it was just really great to see this movie, and I'd forgotten how much I really liked it. One of the things that I think was interesting was, the beginning sets things up in such a way and has a discrete beginning, middle, and end. Sets a really good hook. Sets the rules or whatever, with the phone, and then, what's interesting is that Neve Campbell at the end actually turns the sort of is strong and actually uses the weapons against the killers, not just the weapons, the physical weapons, but also the phone. And I was
she becomes Ghostface briefly.
Completely, and that's what's so symmetrical and interesting about it. Which I love when things are sort of put together in a way that is enormously satisfying. So the movie satisfies us. Really, the movie satisfies in so many ways. I was really sort of impressed with it again.
That's fantastic. Julia, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny that Adam mentions the phone because that's actually there's two times that there's a phone. One time is when he gets hit and he's in his costume, and that's actually Wes Craven that gets hit in the face with the phone for real. And by the way, that's also Wes Craven the janitor at the school that's wearing the Freddy.
Oh, the Freddy janitor, which I thought was a great bit.
Yeah.
With the
but
sweater
also
and the hat.
The other time is when Billy has been cutting up Stu and so that they can set up their escape, and Billy drops the phone on Stu, and he hits him, and he's like, he yells out, "Like, hey, give me the phone, you dick." That was actually an accident. That was ad-libbed by Stu because it was not intended. It was not supposed to happen. But there's actually quite a few things that Matthew Lillard ad-libs, which just doesn't surprise me because he just seems like a really odd, funny guy. Like when he says, "Houston, we have a problem," when he finds that the gun is gone, he's like, "Oh, Houston, we have a problem." Anyway, I enjoy those little things. I don't know. I mean, I think it's I wouldn't call it a comedy, as apparently that's how they got away with the rated R rating, is that they finally convinced the board that it was a comedy and therefore it was not as bad or something. But as opposed to the NC-17 for gore. But I don't think it's comedy, but I do think it's funny and there's some neat, fun things in it. So I think it's one of my more enjoyed. I don't like slasher films, and so if that's what this is, then this is probably one of my favorite slasher films, given that I don't like them very much.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Very cool. Well, I've just sort of droned on a lot, so I'll save most of that. I do think this is definitely worth seeing, and that it's beautifully made, and that it's a beautiful picture. It's not. I don't like the. I don't know. I don't really care much for this particular genre, but that is not at all to suggest that that this is not a well-made film. But it's probably one of the few post-1992 horror films that I would be particularly interested in watching. Although I'm going to watch Scream 2 again, and I'll be darn happy about it. So, all right, let's come around and do endorsements. If you have anything you've been watching, reading, rediscovering, I think we already did a freebie for Carol Clover's Men, Women, and Chainsaws. But other than that...
and for the new X-Files.
And for the new X-Files. So, Julia, you're going to have to come up with something else besides that. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Drew, do you have anything to endorse this week?
Well, I don't know if I can call it a full endorsement yet because I haven't finished it. But I was given a copy of the Scarlet Gospels by Clive Barker for my birthday, and I've been reading it over the last few days. It is first of all, it's Clive Barker's first full novel. He's put out a novella, but it's his first full novel in I don't know how many years, but a while. And it's his return to the Hellraiser mythology, because which is why it's getting all the big noise, because the antagonist of the novel is Pinhead, who we actually learn through the course of the novel actually really does not enjoy being called Pinhead, and in fact reacts rather violently to being referred to as Pinhead, which I think is kind of hysterical. But it's interesting. That sort of stuff is interesting because this is not the Pinhead that's in Hellbound's heart, and it's not even really the Pinhead that's in the first two Hellraiser movies, which is sort of a demonic civil servant in a lot of ways. It's really kind of Barker's reflection on what that character became after he lost control of it, which was the supervillain Pinhead, which shows up in the later sequels. And I'm finding that very interesting. It also the hero of the book for people who are Barker fans is Harry D'Amour, which is if you're just a movie person and not a fiction person, that would be the lead character in Lord of Illusions. It's also a reoccurring character in Barker's books. So it's also kind of interesting seeing those two Barker staple characters sort of colliding against each other. It's an interesting read, and I like the first 20 pages is some really great. I would honestly say the most of the novel actually qualifies more as sort of dark fantasy than outright horror. But the first 20 pages is some awesome, grisly horror. If only Clive Barker can really deliver. Again, this is not a full endorsement. I haven't finished it yet. I'm enjoying it. It still has plenty of time to drop the ball, but I'm several hundred pages into it now, so I can say it's at very least it's a good page turner. Like it's an entertaining enough read that it keeps me wanting to go, and it's also made me want to go back and rewatch the Hellraiser movies. So and kind of enjoy Doug Bradley's performance as Pinhead. But it's definitely worth checking out if you're even just kind of casually a Hellraiser fan.
Very, very cool. Adam, do you have anything to endorse for us?
Actually, I don't have anything to endorse, so I'm going to do something unprecedented. I'm going to endorse this movie. I rediscovered Scream. I recommend other people rediscover it too. Excellent.
All right. Well, actually, that's perfectly fair. Julia, did you have anything this week that you wanted to share with us?
I do. I'll have to remember that for next time. I don't have something, though. I wanted to endorse the TV show Minority Report, which is, of course, based on the movie Minority Report. In the movie, you have the three, triplets or siblings, triplets, who are together. They're precogs, and they predict crimes, and so there's this whole department called pre-crime that goes and arrests people before they kill somebody. So it takes place after that when the pre-crime division has been shut down and the precogs have been released, but now one of them has decided to stop the murders anyway just because he's so tormented. And so it's really interesting, and he's got a cop that he works with to do that. It's a good show. I'm really enjoying it.
Very, very cool. Yeah, so my only endorsement this week, actually, is I just finished reading, and I would do both the book and the movie, but I haven't finished the movie. I just finished reading Burnt Offerings by Robert Marasco. This novel came out back in 1973, and it's about a family that moves into a giant house to take care of it, act as caretakers for the season while the owners leave. And but it's the summer instead of the winter as in The Shining, but it's very, very similar. I mean, all the way down to.
Didn't they make a movie out of that with Oliver Reed and Karen Black?
Yes, Oliver
They
Reed,
did.
Karen Black, a very malevolent Burgess Meredith, and it's. I mean, I watched the first hour last night. I intend to finish it later on tonight. But man, it's a great book. It's really good. Robert Marasco died young-ish. I mean, if you're my age, you consider it young. He died at like 62 years old. But so he only did 2 books and a couple of really renowned plays. He did one called Child's Play, which was about murderous children and rumors in a Catholic school, and which actually I knew because Julia's high school did it, which was freaky weird. But anyway,
that is weird.
Marasco, yeah.
Well, we had a very interesting theater department in our high school, and actually, Jason says it's Julia's high school. It's because we actually met in high school, but he wasn't there when we did that play. Is why he says it's mine. But yeah, we did some weird stuff, man. Yeah, it was pretty dark.
Yes, it's a dark play. Anyway, Marasco died young, not long after writing Burn Offerings. But boy, is it a good book. It was creepy. It kept me up. It was disturbing. And the movie seems to be pretty good, too. It's not well remembered. I guess what kind of happened is that The Shining came out and all those that had gone before were sort of forgotten, I guess. But, man, it's good. I ordered a copy, used through Amazon or something, because you can find a lot of old books as they're out of print for $2.25 in postage, or sometimes even less, and that was what happened here. So yes, my endorsement is Burn Offerings. Anyway, that's it for the beginning of the Wes Craven retrospective. We're going to be doing more. We want you to engage with us on Facebook and tell us where we got it wrong. You can tell me that I'm being insulting to the memory of Wes Craven or anything else that you want, and we will totally answer to those things. One more note, the Castle of Horror podcast, including essentially everybody, except for that Adam, I don't think he'll be making it to Denver, but if you could figure it out, you are welcome. But basically... You
have to share a room with Tony if you're going to stay with us.
Yeah, you'll have to share a room with Tony. But we're going to be doing a live podcast at the Colorado Horror Con here in Denver on Halloween weekend, and I cannot wait. It's going to be super awesome.
We will, however, be seeing Adam at Disneyland in a week and a half or so.
Yes, we will not be doing a live podcast from Disneyland, although if I could come up with an excuse for it, I totally would do that.
although
we are going to the Halloween party, so.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, we're going for the Halloween party. I mean, just to keep it consistent with the theme. It's not like we're just doing teacups. Yeah.
I don't do the freaking teacups, man. Those are nauseating.
No. Maybe I should post some video, though, from the Haunted Mansion while we're there. Anyway, thank you, everybody. If you are enjoying our show, but you know friends who would enjoy it but haven't listened to it yet, kidnap them, tie them up with duct tape, and rather than disemboweling them, force them to listen to our show.
Maybe don't do that, though, really.
If you actually do that, it's not that I was literally suggesting that. That would be insane. So, okay.
So
thank
says
you,
the
everyone.
attorney Julia Guzman.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week. We really appreciate you being here. Leave reviews for us. Goodbye.
Buonanotte.
All right.
Bye.